What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast. I'm Sam, your show host. Thanks for tuning in. I am super excited about this episode. Back on here with Johnny Mack this week from Soul Seekers, one of my good friends down here in Texas that we connected with here in 2023. And this is his first year hunting whitetail in Texas, his first year on a deer lease. He's from the Pacific Northwest area, so he has a background hunting in that environment and everything. So a deer lease and hunting whitetail in Texas has been a huge learning curve from him. He's mastering it. He's doing everything he can to do it the right way. Him and I have been regularly in communication talking about his hunting property, hunting tactics for whitetail in Texas, all that kind of stuff. And we connected on this podcast to talk about just those things. I wanted to, now that the season has started, I wanted to be able to talk to him about, some of the things that he's learned, some of the struggles he's having right now, and us just have a good productive discussion about those things. So this is a great conversation for not just Texas hunters, but hunters outside of Texas who are wanting to gain a better understanding of what is it about sitting over a feeder that guys just ooh and ah over. So, and it's more than just that, I promise. But before we get into the episode, I want to say that this podcast is driven by Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Derek and Lacey over there in Mississippi, they book hunts with vetted outfitters across the country. They have a large network of trusted individuals that Derek has vetted personally that he will set you guys up with if you're looking for that next adventure, bucket list hunt, once in a lifetime hunt, all that kind of stuff. So give Derek a call. He'll work with you on all the details. And that's Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Go check them out on Facebook and on their website. The podcast is also partnered with the Outdoor Call radio app. Outdoors Dan from Respect the Game TV. He created an app that you guys can download on your device where you can stream hunting shows and podcasts on audio, on a loop, every single day. You'll catch Fall Obsession podcast episodes on there, streaming on that loop on Mondays, as well as tons of other shows throughout the week that you guys know, love, and enjoy. So give Outdoors Dan a follow on social media, download the app on your phone, and start streaming today. It's free, 100%. They don't ask for any payment info or anything like that. And Dan also does a couple of live radio shows every single week as well, and he streams those as well on his Facebook on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So go follow him on social media if you're not already. Last but not least, if you guys have your own outdoor brand or organization that you represent and you think that you guys would be interested in advertising through this podcast during this sponsor segment in our weekly episode launch, go to fallobsession.com/podcast. There's a form on there that you guys can fill out. It will put you in touch with me and our production team, and we will be able to talk through the details of what that would look like, what you guys can expect, and everything that comes with partnering with us through our podcast or our other media series. So fallobsession.com is the fallobsession.com/podcast, is where you need to go for that. And we hope to be partnering with you. We'd love to see your brand represented on here. That's it from me. We're going to the conversation with Johnny Mack. You guys are listening to another Fall Obsession podcast.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another podcast. I am Sam, your host this week, and joining me again on our Fall Obsession podcast is Johnny Mack from Soul Seekers. What's happening, brother?
Not much, Samuel. Just living a beautiful day down here in the great state of Texas.
I know,
Blue
right?
Sky is shining.
Yeah, well, we wanted to squeeze another podcast in for our listeners that are either coming from the Soul Seekers platform or you're a returning Fall Obsession listener. Johnny Mack's been on our podcast before, episode 154, and that's when you kind of shared your journey with us, as far as what brought you to Texas, how Soul Seekers began, your journey into the hunting, becoming a hunter, basically, and your passion for all that. Really want our listeners to go back and listen to that one if you guys haven't. But today, we're going to talk a little bit more nuts and bolts about hunting Texas, because you're coming from the Pacific Northwest. You have very minimal background in whitetail hunting prior to your arrival in Texas, and now, as you and I both know very well, you are learning the journey of pursuing Texas whitetails. So the season started, man, and I know you've been out there. What's it looking like for you right now?
Oh man, well, hopes are high. There's so much that you're setting me up for so much on that question. Hunting Texas whitetails is super addicting. It's the ultimate chess game that I've learned.
Yeah.
Going into it, I kind of figured, and this was an assumption, a bad assumption on my part, that it was like shooting fish in a barrel, and as long as your feeder's going off, that they're going to come like a dinner bell straight to that feeder. And it's not that case.
Yeah.
Not that case. At least in early season. I can't speak for November, December, January yet, because we haven't gotten to that point. However, I know that there's a lot of acorns on the ground right now and natural feed. And so it's like, okay, well, why would a deer want to show up to my feeder? It's been quite a learning process, as well, as far as, I know how to hunt, but everything when it comes to whitetail and setting up within the boundaries of a lease, like, challenges you on different perspectives that you might not think of beforehand. And so as I was sitting in my blind this last weekend, I had an epiphany of like, man, I love my feeder. I love where it's at. I love the location. And I think my blind's on the wrong side of my feeder. like small stuff like that. I put it in a position where I felt like I had the best vision. But it's also in a position of, based off of where the deer are coming from and the boundaries of my lease and what direction the wind blows the majority of the time. I think I'm in a position where I might have a difficult time hunting during archery season specifically. Rifle season will be a different ball game when you can reach out and touch something at 150 and beyond. But getting within that 40 yards and in where you got the blind to the feeder, it's an interesting experience.
Yeah. So is the wind, you mentioned that, is that the big factor in making you think that it's on the wrong side?
Yep. So how I have my blind set up, it is on the east side of my feeder. Winds down here predominantly blow north, from the north on a cold front, or from south as well. And I thought, my feeder's 20 yards to my west. Sun rises behind me, sets in front of me. But there's a lake back behind me, and I'm pretty sure that's where the bedding area is. So I set it up imagining that I would be able to hunt a south wind, as the deer would be coming from the south field. There's also a creek that runs as my boundary line of my lease. I was like, I'll get deer cruising that creek, and then they'll pop out, walk the timber line right to my feeder. We're going to be good to go.
Yeah.
Well, I think the deer are actually coming from the lake a whole lot more. So if I get a north wind, then they're not smelling me. But if they are crossing the natural path of least resistance, which I'm assuming the deer are walking, then they're going to actually catch my scent on a north wind when they're about 60 yards from the feeder. And if it's a south wind, I got a feeling that they're going to be crossing my scent before I even see them.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like reevaluating. And if I was on the other side of my feeder, I think everything would be dialed in a whole lot more.
Now, you mentioned that the sun rises to your back, it sets to in front of you, so your stand faces west. So in theory, if you were to move that to, not saying you should at this point in your season, but if you were to move that later on to the other side, is that going to create a morning sit issue for you, having the sun shine in your eyes, do you think?
Yeah, I think when it comes to rifle season, it might.
Yeah.
The other big issue is having sun shine directly into my blind, right?
Yeah.
Then you're not sitting in the shadows as well and in
More
the dark
illuminated,
backdrop.
yeah.
So, yeah. So, you know, as I've gone through this process, and I've only done 3 sits so far on this hunt. I've done 2 mornings and 1 evening, and both mornings, no deer showed up after I was getting consistent activity on my feeder. The evening sit, I did see a doe in the creek draw, the creek line, like I was originally anticipating, and it had a little fawn with it, but it popped its head out and then just continued south along that creek. And then right before daylight ended, I saw a smaller buck about 150 yards south of my blind, which is exactly where I'd expect one to be. But with it being archery season, and I don't even think it was a legal buck at that point as well. But that's the only action I've experienced in the blind. Gotcha.
Now your your Tacticam is showing some more action when you're not there. Am I right?
Yeah, dude, I gotta say, man, so I've never really experienced like trail cams before in a consistent use fashion. Up in the Northwest, I've used trail cams before. I've had one stolen from me on public land. But then also I wasn't ever using cell cam. So it was like, all right, well, I'm going to set this, and I don't know the next time I'll come back to check this camera.
Hope
we'll
that
just
it's
see
still
what's
there.
on it. But down here, those reveal cell cams, you know, it's like Christmas morning. Every day I wake up and I'm like, oh, what showed up to my feeder during the night, and what's going to happen today, and oh, what notification's going off now. One of the biggest frustrations that I'm experiencing when it comes to trail cams and whitetail hunting is for my 3 sits this weekend, I sat my west blind. So my west blind is one we were talking about. My east blind is set up for a north wind. And this last weekend, I had a lot of southern winds going on, and actually miscommunication on what weather apps were saying versus what wind was doing on the ground in that specific location. And my I'm sitting in my west feeder, west blind, just not seeing anything. And I'm just getting notification after notification that deer are just continually rolling in to my other feeder that is on the other side of my lease. And I'm just like, doggone it, man. This is, you know, the impatience, the challenges of like the chess game. If I move here, where are the deer going to go? Do they feel the pressure? Do they not feel the pressure? Am I being quiet enough? Am I covering my scent? Am I doing everything I need to do to have a shot opportunity? And what ended up happening is I started to build up a lot of frustrations, and that stems from other avenues as well, which we can get into in regards to like the family life and the family dynamic of what hunting season looks like in whitetail country versus what it looks like in Western big game country as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, what kind of frustrations are we talking about? I think you and I are probably on similar wavelengths here, but for our listeners, what are we talking here for those that aren't familiar with the Texas whitetail pursuit?
Yeah. So I will say this. So I am leasing a section of land on a larger ranch land that has multiple people who lease from it. When I pulled up for my evening sit last Sunday, I 100% wanted to sit my east blind. And I was like, that's the one that's getting all the action. I want to sit there. And as soon as I pulled up, I got out because the weather apps, they weren't reporting accurate enough for me. So I checked the wind, and the wind was out of the south, and I was like, doggone it, I can't hunt this blind once again. All of a sudden, notification. One of the bucks that's on my hit list was at the feeder at that exact moment. It came out. Man. And on the north side of my lease, there is a tree line and a fence line. That is the divider between my portion and a different portion. But there is a gate that is wide open that is about 50 yards from my feeder. And the wind was perfect. And I was like, man, okay, so this is a struggle of like Western big game hunting. You can use topography and terrain features and wind and thermals to map out how you're going to make a stalk on an animal and make it happen. I knew that all I would have to do is hop a fence and hug, like be literally 3 yards from the boundary of my lease, walk that tree line, pop around that gate, and I'd have a shot opportunity at one of my bucks. The biggest issue that I face, though, is that trespassing.
Yeah.
Am I now not able to shoot the deer that I want to shoot, or shoot any deer at that matter? Because I want to get meat in the freezer, man. It's meat crisis time. It's time to start stocking up. So it's a wide open gate. Like, I don't have to open anything. All I got to do is slowly sneak around the edge, and I got a wide open lane to shoot at whatever deer it is, whether it's the buck that I want or it's a doe or anything. And I didn't, because I don't know who's the leaser or the leasee, I guess, of the property to the north of me. Would they care? It's not like I was hunting the animals that are on their lease. I'm hunting the ones that are within my boundaries, but I was walking. I didn't feel comfortable walking a fence line on property that I didn't pay the lease.
No, that's 100% the right call. And you know, it sucks. I think you asked me a question. I don't remember the exact question, but when I came on your podcast, you were asking, you know, about the differences and what's the draw to Texas hunting, and you know, why aren't you spot and stalking these animals, essentially, is what came up in our conversation. And that's a big portion of it. Like you mentioned, you know, you go out west, you can run free, basically, you know, for the most part. And you get down here and everything's all boxed in and contained. And, you know, the relationships between hunter and landowner, just Joe Blow off the street in Texas, are a lot different than other states. You know, people tend to hold their land a little bit closer to their hearts in Texas, and they don't like, I mean, a guy just walking up like, hey, can I walk through your pasture, you know, to get to my other gate or whatever. There's in Texas, at least, if he's dressed in camo, I feel like there's a lot better chance that the answer is going to be no, opposed to some other states, just because I don't know, it's just a culture thing down here. We have, not that we're not friendly or anything, but when it comes to hunting and land access, people are paranoid, man, down here. They really are. So I mean, it's different if you know the landowner, if you can communicate with them and that kind of stuff. I know plenty of guys that can, but for you not knowing who has that piece, I'd say that was the right call, because all it takes is you hopping that fence and going over there. Yes, that's without permission, it's technically trespassing. And then on the flip side, if you get a guy over there that you can't see that's bow hunting and he sees you, he's like, what the heck is this guy doing? You know, he doesn't know what you're doing. So,
right.
You know, I mean, right. Smart call, but.
Well, and so that was where some frustration built up in regards to whitetail hunting, you know, southern whitetail hunting. So here I am. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to my other blind. I'm going to feel good about this. It's the first time I've sat at evening. I've had activity roll through, but it's been dead in the mornings. I'm not sure if it's me or what. So one of the other frustrations that's really occurred is in my relationship with my wife. My wife is a big supporter and proponent of hunting and me providing meat for the family. However, we have 3 young boys, and I'm not sure, and we've talked about it a little bit, but it does bring up some frustrations where, Western big game hunting, it's like, all right, babe, I'm going on a deer hunt. It's going to be these days, and deer season is only these couple weeks.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. That's all you got. Down here, and especially in the state of Washington where I come from, you have to also select what weapon you're hunting. So if you choose archery, that's the only thing that you can hunt the entire time is during the archery seasons.
Right.
So down here, it's like, as long as you got the weapon that's legal, deer season is open a long time. And so her is like, okay, she can prepare herself mentally for when I'm going to be gone for 4 days, 5 days. Like, okay, this is going to be maybe hard on her at the time, but then I'll be home and I'll be present the rest of the time. Being down here and knowing I'm only 40 minutes from my lease and 40 minutes from a cell cam notification that there's deer active, and it's just, an arm's reach away. I'm fighting a battle of continually to staying present when being at home with my family, knowing that I have not notched my tags yet.
Yeah.
I feel this pressure. I'm pretty sure I put it on myself that I'm in a time crunch.
Mm-hmm.
The sooner that I can notch a tag, the sooner that then I can focus on, the hunting with my boys during youth weekend, or kind of checking the boxes and getting them out of the way in order for me to then plan stuff later on and not having to be like, okay, well, what's the weather system going to be doing this week? Or, oh, babe, I'm sorry, there's a birthday party, but there's a cold front coming in and this is like the prime time and the wind. So these are the struggles that I'm facing when it comes to southern whitetail hunting. And with that being said, this is my first season, so I don't have that experience, and my wife doesn't have that full understanding of the dynamic of what it looks like. What does it look like in your household?
So I was gonna bring that up because it's been a learning curve for sure. So we've had our lease, which is the property that our followers can see in our Texas Dirt series on Carbon TV. This is now our 3rd year on that property. So prior to Texas Dirt existing and us having that lease, I didn't have a lease in Texas for a long time, and because of that, any hunting opportunity that I got since I've been married was always kind of, even though we live in Texas and I've grown up hunting in Texas, it was always like, hey, there's a staff hunt this weekend later this year that I want to go on, or I'm going to Montana for this week this year, and it would be 2 or 3 trips like that throughout the year, and that was it. My wife grew up in Colorado, and her dad, he was, he'd hunt elk every year, and he had like 1 or 2 weeks a year that he would hunt elk, and that was it. That was his hunting season. So coming from a background to that, to now having a deer lease, and of course me growing up on a deer lease, it was like, man, it felt like growing up, Dad and I would just go out there whenever we wanted, we go out all the time. We would hunt all the time. We'd hunt for however, if the weather sucked and we weren't seeing anything, we'd just come home. If we were killing deer and having a good time, we'd stay out longer, it was different.
Right.
And so first year down here, that was like my idea of it and everything. And that didn't work at home. Excuse me. Got some in my throat today. That didn't work at home either. So the past couple years have been a learning curve to that, and it's a balance. The first understanding is knowing that I know like everybody wants to fill their tags as soon as possible, and that's just a mentality of, well, if I don't shoot it now, am I gonna get the opportunity later? That's the question. And most guys are, have stories about how, well, man, I held out and, then I ended up, having a tag left over, or whatever the case might be. And there's always that gamble. But the other understanding is, if you bow hunt in Texas, your season is 3.5 months total from the beginning of October to the middle of January. Middle of January, those last 2 weeks being like your doe only season. So if you have a doe tag left, you can still shoot a doe. So you have 3.5 months to start is your working area, if you will. And then it's like this year, what I'm trying to really drive home, and we've actually, with some of our recent guests on our podcast, we've talked about it a lot, is when to hunt. And the last 2 episodes actually I've recorded with 2 guys that longtime deer hunters in their respective areas, and they both talked to me about how they're not hunting opening day, or they didn't hunt opening weekend, because the weather wasn't right, their big bucks weren't daylighting. They had various reasons for that mentality, but in talking to these people, I took some of the stuff to heart. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to go hunt just to hunt. That was my mentality. And I get that it's different too. You got your lease, like you said, 40 minutes away, daytime pictures begging you to come out there, and then, work schedules and other stuff play into account. You and I have talked about that too, where, my schedule changes where, I might work a whole weekend and then have a bunch of time off during the week, but you're a teacher, so your time is on the weekends as well. I get that plays into effect too, but we try to plan our trips out in advance. We try to compromise when we can. Like coming up this weekend, it won't be accurate with the time of our publication here, but from when we're recording this weekend, my son has a baseball game tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, the weather is going to be great tomorrow and Sunday. I would love to be leaving today to go out there and hunt tonight, tomorrow, Sunday. But I'm going to stay. We're going to go to the baseball game tomorrow, and then after lunch tomorrow, I'm going to head out there, get a couple hunts in, and then come back. So it's just, if I could give you any advice, it's a lot of communication. It's trying to plan stuff out ahead of time as best you can. And both with your hunting trips, and then, hey, this is when I'm going to be home. This is when I'm going to be, doing stuff around here, or doing this with the kids, or you, or that kind of stuff. That's the best advice that I can give, I guess, based on the situation. And and that's what sucks. It changes. You could look at a week and be like, man, it's going to be hot this weekend. This weekend isn't going to be good for hunting, and not plan a trip. Or you could be looking at it as, man, the weather's going to be great. Like tomorrow, the weather's going to be great tomorrow morning, but we got a baseball game, so we're going to baseball, So that's the gamble of Texas hunting. And again, I bring up that the season's 3.5 months long. Just again, as much as we all want to tag out and get, start off the season hot, sometimes playing that long game a little bit is better for the family too, and not just the dynamics you're seeing out in the woods. So.
Right. Well, one of the things for me is knowing that I have 2 doe tags in my pocket. I feel like any deer that steps out in front of me is an opportunity to get shot, subjective to the antler restrictions down here. So I'm like, all right, I want to get out and hunt, because I know that I have 4 tags. I'm going to be bringing my boys out. They're going to shoot a doe each. That's a lot of deer to have an opportunity to get after. And I don't want that pressure. And this is where I get to reevaluate my mindset, is I don't really want that pressure to hit in December when weekends are going to be dedicated towards like Christmas activities, or
right.
Kids plays, or just, different things that are already on the calendar. But they always say patience is a virtue. So I know if I was to tag out in a buck early, then I would miss the magic of what a true whitetail deer rut is like. And you've told me that anything is possible during that time as well.
It is. And man, I still remember our first year on Texas Dirt. During the rut, I sat in what was probably one of my best morning sits of all time that I've ever had. I had deer moving constantly around me from daylight all the way until like 9:30 in the afternoon. It was constant motion around me. I ended up shooting a doe that morning, and it's on our first season of Texas Dirt, but just young bucks coming in, and then the older bucks started coming in, and or one older buck, I should say, started coming in and teaching these young guys a lesson, you know, running them out of there and everything. And at the time, and I kicked myself for not shooting him. I had multiple chances to shoot him that year, but I was trying to save him for my wife, and I had a bigger deer in my sights. I got greedy too late in the year is what it accounted to. But all as to say, just watching that buck and those dynamics happen in front of you and everything, and all these deer running around you without a care in the world. And on top of that, it was just the perfect morning too. It was, you know, cool, very little wind, sun coming up, dew on the ground. It was one of those mornings, and it's just it to this day, it's one of the most memorable hunts I've had. The rut is something special, man. It really is.
That's awesome. Well, I will say this, you know, it's been a while since I shot a deer, and let alone a buck, and I'm like, all right, I just want to get my hands on one. I want to process an animal. I want to get real with it.
Yeah.
I put a post up on social media of different bucks, and it was a shoot or pass thing.
Yeah.
And all the feedback that I got in regards to that buck that I posted, knowing that there was bigger bucks out there, said, everyone from Texas said pass. Everyone not from Texas said shoot. And I found that to be a really interesting paradox of like, okay, is this the perspective of Western hunting where it's like, this is your hunt, you don't know what you're going to see next, just send it, versus whitetail Southern guys that are running trail cameras and are constantly seeing the other bucks that are in the area, and knowing that it is a longer season, and you know,
yeah,
that is an interesting looking at that.
Yeah. Well, I think I commented on that post. I think I was one of the Texas guys that told you to wait. But I remember you asking, like, if this deer's out, you know, in front of you opening week, or, you know, something like that, or are you shooting it, or are you waiting for your target buck? And, you know, I don't know your relation to the other people that were on there talking to you or anything. I feel like I have a decent, you know, outlook on what you have going on out there, because your shooter list is a stud list out there. It truly is. And so from that aspect, you know, I'm again, and I think I told you, if I was you and I had that property, or those deer were on my property, and 120, 130 inch buck walks out opening day, I'm probably going to let him walk. And, you know, there's going to be plenty of people across the country that would see me do that on our Texas Dirt series, or even hear me say it on this podcast. And they're like, dude, what are you doing, man? Come on. I get it, man. It's not that way everywhere. But in my mind, like, yes, there comes a time where you got to draw a line in the sand. Like, okay, I have to take a buck now. Like, I have to take a legal buck now. And that's the line that I didn't draw 2 years ago on Texas Dirt with this one deer in particular I keep talking about. But, man, yeah, as patterned as those shooters that you have, those hit listers are out there, I would be hunting them and wanting to put an arrow in one of them. And I know it almost isn't fair to you, right? Because this is your first year hunting Texas. First year hunting Texas, and you're in this predicament. So I get the struggle, man. I get it.
Yeah, the struggle is real, and there's worse problems to be faced in this life. We're like I get it. I don't want to come off like a total whiner. Like, oh, woe is me. What I don't, you know.
I got too big a deer to shoot.
Yeah, right. But I will say this. And this resonates in my mind quite a bit, and it echoes around. It is the idea, because I've had a lot of different guests on my podcast, and a lot of them, I've like some people who have been on from the TV show Alone, to Native American spirit guides and coming of age ceremonies, and a lot of different perspectives of what a hunt looks like for people. And I really appreciate, and I feel a connection with nature where an animal presents itself as a gift and an opportunity, kind of the Native American view of, you know, I'm not, and we are redefining currently what trophy hunting is, because anything is a trophy if you're bringing it home with you. That is your trophy. Yeah, so when that deer steps out and not qualifying its life of like, oh, I'm going to pass on this animal because I want bigger antlers, knowing that when an animal steps out, it is a gift that is being presented to you, and a disrespect to that animal is saying, okay, I will sacrifice my life, shoot me, like I'm here, this is your opportunity, we've come together. So I struggle with that. Now that's where I need to still dive into my identity as a hunter and how I view everything. But these are the thoughts that roll through my mind when it's like, oh man, we'll hold out and shoot this one target buck. It's like, yeah, but what does that represent to me as a hunter? How do I translate that to other people, to non-hunters, that I'm only going after these monster bucks because they look great and it's an ego pump for myself? Now, I don't want to sound condemning and I don't want to judge or point fingers, but with that being said, everyone gets to hunt their own hunt. You know, there's a different stage of sportsmen, and one of those stages is where you start to only hunt mature, high quality representations of that class of animal. I'm not to that point yet in my hunting career, right? So, I mean, I've only shot 3 deer in my entire journey. And one was a doe, one was a spike, and then one was an 8-point that I loved. And that was the biggest deer to date. And I was like, yes, dude, I'm so proud. And that deer that I shot, I don't even think would be legal in Texas, ironically. Like, it's this beautiful basket buck. So that's where my heart is like torn between, I just want to shoot an animal versus pursuing a specific one for any other reason.
So I get your position, and I 100%, you know, to a point share that same struggle. Like, am I being greedy, you know, or is that the outlook that I'm portraying? And in the past, I'm confident that, like, again, season 1 of Texas Stirred, I probably was. But the other side of it, as it's relevant to hunting Texas or similar environments, is when you look at it from a deer and a habitat, a land management standpoint, in that you having your own property to hunt, you know, it's not a huge, it's not a mountain, it's not a big piece of public, it's nothing like that where you are the hunter, you're pursuing game, and like you mentioned earlier, this is your one opportunity when that animal steps out. Unlike that, you now have a piece of property that is yours, that land has been, you know, or that area, however it's divvied up in anybody's respective area, it's been trusted to you basically to have dominion, to have stewardship over that. And that's kind of how my outlook at this point as a hunter has shifted to be, man, yes, I could shoot the first legal deer that walks out in front of me, but that legal deer might only be 3.5 years old. It would be a great trophy for some, and if there were some specific individuals in certain areas of their hunting journey, like my son or like my wife or somebody like that, it might be a different story. But at least for me, being the one that's trusted with that land, with that stewardship, I want the future generations of not just hunters but of deer to be a success. I want to see quality deer coming in the future. I want good genetics running through my deer herd, and all these different things. And shooting a 3.5-year-old deer with good genetics, in my mind, is not having good stewardship when I have a 5.5-year-old deer that's in his prime. Physically and in antler size, he's bigger because he's an older deer. But this is a deer who is at the point where he's ready to harvest. And I don't like the word harvest. I really don't. I feel like a farmer when I say the word harvest. Like, we're hunters and we're killing animals. Like, not to shed a dark light, but from the stewardship side of it, that's the only time I will ever use that term, because when you're managing a deer herd, when you're managing a property, when you're managing a population, when you're on this property and these are your deer, not just this year, but for future years too, that's the outlook that I try to have is, yeah, I could shoot that 3.5-year-old 8-point this year. He's a beautiful buck, but what's he going to be next year? How many does is he going to breed this year? And all these other things start running through my mind as far as what this buck can do for my deer population for future generations of deer. And that's the game that I play when I'm looking at those trail cam pictures. And typically when I'm looking at those pictures, I'll look at, and thank the Lord for cell cams, we can do this, right? You can look at it from your living room couch and be like, yeah, I'm not going to shoot that deer. Yeah, I'm going to shoot that deer. And you can start scrolling through it. That way, when that deer walks out in front of you, you have, more than likely, unless it's the rut or something, it's a new deer you haven't seen before, you know what he looks like, and you've already made up in your mind, man, I'm going to pass on him or I'm going to shoot him. And so I don't know, that's, you can take that for what it's worth. That's the outlook. And I get that different people are at different stages of their hunting journeys and anything. I'm by no means telling you that, don't shoot the next legal buck that you see. I've given you my perspective, and I've seen the quality of deer you have out there again. And
yeah,
the other side of it too, it depends on property size a lot. We're fortunate with a property our size that we have a lot of deer that live on our property and that for the most part stay local to our property. Not that they don't venture out a little bit, but our property's big enough and there's not a whole lot of hunting pressure in the surrounding area immediately around us to where like I have to worry about neighbors shooting my deer. But for some people on small properties, that's another reality. Like, hey, if I don't shoot this buck, my neighbor's going to shoot him because he shoots anything that's brown, or whatever the case might be. So all those dynamics have to come into play in one way or another. And different people have different trains of thoughts when it comes to it. So,
you bring up some really good points, and I will chew on that. And that makes sense. I think that's more the Western hunting mindset of what I've had of like, you put in all this work, an animal presents itself, you want to take it. And I need to understand the management side of it more. Yeah. Right. And so I hear what you're saying. I acknowledge you and I receive it because that makes sense. It makes 100% sense.
The work sense that you just talked about, it's not absent in the Texas hunting, because like, I know you've Western hunted a whole lot more than I have. I've only gone a couple times, but I understand the work, right? It's a grind, out there physically chasing these animals, trying to make them move on them, get in on them. That's the work side of your hunt out west. And if you're able to put that much work into it as a hunter and be successful and fill your tag, like you said earlier, that's a trophy. Doesn't matter what's on its head. But the work side in Texas, and this is the other side of it, is people from the outside looking in at Texas are like you said, fish in a barrel. Y'all aren't doing any work. You're just sitting in a stand on a feeder. And don't get me wrong, there's some guys that is all they do. Like, they fill their feeders in September, and come October and November, they just sit out there and wait. They might not even have a camera out. They just see what walks out and just shoot whatever they want. There are guys like that, but the smart hunter in Texas that cares about his property, cares about his deer population, all that work is a different kind of work that's done on the front end. It's done in the summer months, in the spring months, in the months leading into the season to prepare your property, your deer population, and all that kind of stuff for the fall and for future seasons. Like, we run protein in our feeders. We're feeding these deer specific things in our feed because we want to grow big deer, healthy deer out there on our property. We're scouting, we're moving cameras around, we're looking at different aspects of the property. Where can we put new stands in? Is this stand doing what it needs to do for us? That's where the work side comes in, is before we ever get in the stand. The get in the stand part's the relaxing part. That's when I finally get to get up in a tree. I'm just like, oh, finally, I made it. We're here now. But all that work comes in the front end. So it's both of them are hunting, but it's two completely different worlds. Yet you're pursuing the same species, which is funny. But
yeah, no, it's a right and left hand. Tying it to like a baseball concept.
Yeah.
You're all one body, but your left hand fits in a mitt, and it does a different thing than what your right hand does when you're holding the ball and throwing it. So I know that I put in the work when this new lease and having to set up feeder pens and hog panels around my feeders, and like doing all the trimming and shooting lanes and preparing my property for a high percentage opportunity. I definitely know that I learned that I put in my work for sure, and I'm ready to reap my rewards, and that's where my patience sometimes can get the best of me. The other thing is I've had this pressure of time of like, okay, I only got a couple hours here, a couple hours there, and I am having a hard time relaxing into the hunt and just enjoying the process rather than just being like, all right, I want to get to that end destination.
Yeah, and that comes with time. That comes with hunting Texas more and getting more comfortable in a stand, or understanding what that does for you as a person too, because if you're used to run and gun and getting it, in order to achieve your goal, some people might get in a ground blind or a tree stand and be like, man, that's kind of boring. But when you take a deep breath, when you turn your phone off or put it in your pocket, whatever, and you take it all in, and you stop and you make that a habit, you make that part of every single hunt, regardless of what the weather's doing, regardless of what stand you're in, regardless of where you're at, you take a few moments and take it all in. That's where you start to find that inner peace, basically, that you want to find through hunting, in Texas. And that's the hard part too, at least what I find, from first off, these things are, a curse, I mean, it's easy when you have time to kill to pull out your phone, but next thing you know, you've killed 30 minutes and you've been staring at your screen the whole time. So you have to be cognizant of that, hey, cell phones aren't for the deer stand. I mean, yes, have it with you in case there's an emergency or something happens or somebody's, family got to get a hold of you. But, it's not phone time in stand time. People need to get out of the habit of that, because I've heard of people getting into that. And then the other side too is just, for me, is always a distraction, is when I'm trying to film. I'm filming a show, so I get in the stand, I got to get all my cameras and everything set up, then I got to get some B-roll, then I got to do interviews, and then I got to do all these things. Yes, I still got to do them, but I also have to remember that there comes a time in a hunt where I gotta push the camera to the side and just be there and just be a hunter for a minute. That's the important part, and that's why we do it. We don't do it because we want to film a show. That's a bonus piece of this, but there's times where that's what you got to do too. So
yeah. One of the things I wanted to bring up and ask you, pick your brain on, is this idea of, I'm hunting out of pop-up blinds because that's what I could afford at the time in order to get my lease up and running, because it costs a lot of money to get a lease up and running, and I didn't realize really how much it costs. So with that being said, I have pop-up blinds that are sitting 20 to 30 yards away from my feeders for archery season purposes. And right now, deer aren't coming to the feeders as much. But in later seasons, as the season progresses, they should be coming to the feeders a whole lot more. But then it's not archery season anymore, and I have the ability to pull out a rifle, and I want to be able to reach out and touch something at 200 yards away. But at the same time, it's like, whew, if a deer comes with a feeder and I'm on my gun like that, it just feels like there's a weird concept to it of I've been preparing my weapons for shooting at long distance, but my blind is set up 20 yards from my feeder. It's like, oh, do I carry a bow with me also just in case so I can pull that up? I really want to arrow a deer.
Yeah.
But I don't want to miss an opportunity because I only carried one weapon or vice versa, or like how I want my hunt to go. Do you ever find that as an issue?
So there's different schools of thought. I have a perspective on it. I bow hunt only, but that's just the personal. That's where I'm at in my hunting journey right now, and my own personal decision that I am only going to bow hunt. So I like from October to January, I don't carry a rifle. I don't.
Yeah.
We have a lot of setups on Texas Dirt year 2 when we added a bunch of new spots to our hunting locations. My dad only rifle hunts. He doesn't bow hunt. So there were a couple of different spots where it was stands that we were setting up with a ground blind on them to be able to bow hunt. But my dad was like, man, I would like to have an option to be able to hunt this stand too. But to your point, he didn't want to be 30 yards away from the feeder with his gun. So we understand the cost side of everything too. We're blue collar, just like, everybody probably listening to this podcast is, money's, just doesn't grow on trees when it comes to stands and blinds and that kind of stuff. So one thing that we've done on a couple of our stands is, like, growing up, Dad and I would always just build these little brush blinds. Like, we get just some 2x4s, just some scrap wood or something, and we'd make like a little shooting rail, and then we'd brush it in somewhere, and that would be where we would hunt. And growing up, we killed deer all the time, on those little setups. So that's what we did for Dad, is about 60, 80 yards off of these stands from a different angle than our bow blinds, we would brush him in a little rifle rail like that. Now, if the weather's super cold or super windy, it might not be very pleasant to sit there, but if you have a decent morning, or you at least have the right clothing on, it's a perfect little set. Obviously, with it being a different direction than your bow blind, in his sense, I'm not going to hunt the same stand he's hunting that morning. I'm going to go somewhere else, but it opened up more options for him to be able to hunt there. The goal eventually for us is to transition those rifle rails out and get him like some elevated like tripod stands to sit in, just so he can see over some of these little, 8-foot mesquite trees and stuff we have all over the place out there and everything. So that's the goal in the long term. But for now, we set up just a little cheap, it only costs a few bucks, or even that if you can just find scrap wood, to throw together a little rail next to a tree or something that you can brush yourself in on and hunt from there with a rifle. So that's one option. I do know some guys that carry their rifle with them to their bow blind, and one guy that I know, he shot a big buck doing just that from his bow blind with his rifle last year. So it's completely doable, and he'll tell you, he's like, it felt kind of weird because you're pretty close, but and that's the other thing that goes with hunting, because I get your struggle. I get where you're torn on that and everything too, because at the end of the day, our freezers need to be full come season close, and if it comes down to, if that's the boat that you're in and it comes down to a bow or a gun, making the difference, well, you might have that rifle with you. So, but those are just a couple different schools of thoughts, and that rifle rail and everything, again, is the cheap man's way of being able to hunt your stand from a different angle. So,
totally. Well, so the added funness of it is, when I moved to Texas, I needed to have a lever action gun. I was like, I want to get a lever action.
Yeah.
So my lever action is a nice 45-70, but it's open sights. So I got 3 tiers of weapons. I got my archery stuff, I got an open sight lever action, and then I got my high-powered magnification hunting rifles that I use for Western big game. So I'm like, okay, this is why the pressure of shooting something during archery season is so big for me, because then I don't have to worry about what weapon am I going to bring to the blind with me.
Yeah. No, I get that too. So we still got a couple weeks left, so hopefully hopefully you can ease your struggle a little bit and fill a tag before then. So
I know, dude. I sound like such a whiner. Dude, I'm just living. I'm figuring it out as I go.
Well, no, man. And this is one thing that I've really enjoyed. Just getting to share you coming into this journey and everything. With us. Having connected over the summer and everything, and now you getting into this is, it's been really cool just to get to share some of this basic knowledge. I guess. Not saying you're basic or anything, but for somebody that's just starting out in their lease hunting, not just hunting lease, but hunting Texas journey. I've grown up hunting Texas my whole life, so a lot of this stuff is it's like burned in your brain and you don't even think about it. But to actually have to pull some of this stuff out of my brain, like, oh yeah, that is why we do that. It's been good for me too to be able to share that with you, and I've enjoyed it and everything, and I can't wait to see you successful out there. It's going to be great.
Well, I'll tell you this, I'm honored to be in community with you, brother. It really means a lot. It shows, my mission of mentorship is conservation is being lived out through what you're doing with me right now and what the time you've invested in me and in my journey. So, hopefully by the time this airs, I have a buck down or a deer down, a doe at least, and we're getting to share some different stories and perspectives. I will say having the opportunity is the biggest blessing, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Like in the Bible, it says, take no worry of tomorrow, because tomorrow will bring its own worries. Be present in the moment.
Yeah.
Right. And I think your encouragement of turning your cell phone off when you're in the blind is probably one of the biggest takeaways I've had of this episode of this podcast.
Really?
Because I had this thought. I was like, dude, I wouldn't be getting notifications of my other feeder going off if my phone was off. And then I wouldn't be thinking, oh man, I wish I should have, I would have, It's like, no, I'm here.
Yeah.
And I'm experiencing it. And that's what I really crave and desire. So I really appreciate you sharing that with me.
Man, it just in my mind, having your complete focus, not just on your environment and the hunt itself, but just being able to let your mind go. In my mind, during the early hours and then the late hours, as it gets light, as it gets dark, in my mind, that's the best time. That's the most spiritual time for me, because you're watching the woods wake up, you're watching the woods go to bed. That makes a huge difference for me. And then coincidentally, it's also when in a hunt you're most likely to see something, so they have your full attention. So yeah,
I love it. Well, brother, thank you for having me on. I can't wait to continue to share these stories with you guys and share about the journey. So
absolutely, man.
Also, all the Fall Obsession listeners, Sam came on to the Soul Seeker podcast and laid it down nice and hot. We had an awesome conversation talking about his journey as well. So don't miss hearing Sam's perspective, being a guest on a show rather than being the host.
Yeah, you
really cool.
You get the mantle of the first guy to have me on your podcast. So that was my first guest appearance. So I think that's 232 on your platform is the episode number if folks want to go listen. But I encourage folks to do so too. Before we conclude, man, tell people how they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can watch our show on Carbon TV. It's called Soul Seekers. We are in the middle of releasing season 3 and filming season 4. Podcast, the Soul Seekers podcast by Johnny Mack, found anywhere podcasts are found. And then our website is soulseekersnation.com. A lot of awesome information on there. We're on YouTube as well. And yeah, just reach out if you ever have questions or want to talk. I'm here.
Absolutely. Guys, go check out Johnny Mack, and then hit up the Fall Obsession socials as well. We're on all the major platforms. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got multiple different of our video series dropping right now. Midwest Mindset, Texas Dirt Season 3 is about to drop. All sorts of cool stuff coming out. And then we're on Carbon TV as well. Podcast is on there, so be sure you guys listen, follow, and all that good stuff as well. So, Johnny Mack, thanks again, man. We'll do it again after you get a deer on the ground.
I appreciate it. Pleasure, bud. Have a blessed day.
You too, man. All right, guys. Thank y'all for listening. We're back again next week, and I'll catch you then.